Hello, hello everyone. On behalf of Green Ref Institute and our session partner Oslo Vegetal Festival, welcome to the European Vegan Summit 2024. I'm Piotr Skubała. I'm professor of biological science. I work at the University of Silesia in Katowice, Poland, the Faculty of Natural Science. I'm ecologist, acarologist, but also activist, climate activist. I'm also expert board of Green Ref Institute, the organizer. It's an honor to have joined us today for this exciting, I hope, session on discovering the role of research and science in driving market success for vegan products. Our focus will be on scientific advancement and product innovation within the vegan market. Today, we have a privilege to have with us Professor Galina Hale from University of California, Santa Cruz. Hello, Galina.
Hello.
Galina brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in economics, finance, and sustainability. Her research delves into the sustainability of the global food system, the role of mainstream finance in climate solution, and international financial stability with respect to climate risk. Galina has an impressive record of over 30 publications in leading economics and finance journals, and serves on numerous editorial boards and committees related to animal welfare and agriculture. We are thrilled to have her share her insight with us today. Before we start the discussion, I have an additional question to you. Before we start the discussion, I wanted to add that when I introduce myself, I often mention that I'm an earthling. I'm a mammal. I'm one of the millions of species inhabiting our beautiful planet. This perspective, the emphasis that that I'm only and as much an animal, seems very important to me in today's times of climate and environmental crisis. Would you like to add something important to you, to your bio, when you introduce yourself? I said only a few information, a few data on you, but what is for you the most important in your biogram, in your bio? Can you add something?
Yes, I think along your lines, in fact, I am definitely not above the nature. I'm part of the nature. I'm part of the biosphere. I'm very aware of my contribution to the biosphere, all the positive and the negative. And to remind myself of that, I try to go backpacking in nature, out in the mountains just by myself, at least once a year for a few days, where it is really just me and nature and no other inputs, and I can reconnect. And after a couple of days, I start talking to the mountains and the animals and the trees and thanking them for making my trip very beautiful. So that's one piece of information I can share.
Great. We are only a thread in the web of life on this planet. One of million species, as important as any other species on this planet, between plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, one of the species. Thank you very much for this additional information. Let's start into our discussion and explore the transformative power of science and research and development in and for the vegan market. You are an expert in this field. And the first question, how is the climate and environmental awareness of investors changing? To what extent can we speak of a permanent change, a temporary trend, and to what extent of mere greenwashing in this field?
Yeah, so it's a big question. So I can say that the awareness, both in terms of climate change and in terms of the importance of biodiversity, is definitely increasing. I would say with climate, it's since the Paris Accord, COP21 in 2015. A lot of research is showing that investors are reacting to climate-related information after 2016. And that, I think, is a trend, and it's not going away. Once you learn something, you cannot unlearn it, right? Then biodiversity is a little bit more recent, but I know that the network of central banks called Network for Greening Financial System, they're working very hard to get the biodiversity, give it the same status as the climate change in the conversation, because those are interconnected and hugely important for obvious reasons. Now, greenwashing is a separate thing, right? So investors are aware of the climate risks and the importance of climate change. They still have to report their bottom line to their owners, their stockholders. And to what extent do they factor in climate-related risks is still a big question. There's not a ton of evidence to show that investors change their behavior. So they're more aware, but they don't necessarily do anything differently. It's like not my problem kind of situation. In fact, I just saw a paper yesterday that came out at the National Bureau of Economic Research. They looked at all the green bonds issued in the US. So the idea is green bonds should be funding projects that are specifically solving the climate problem, right? So either greening the energy or reducing emissions, capturing existing CO2. What they find is only 2% of the bonds were actually used. The money from the bond issues were used to fund such actual green projects. The other 98% were basically the general use of money to pay off existing debt. So that's really as greenwashing as it gets. So I think the situation is slightly better in Europe because the EU has a taxonomy of what the green projects might be. So the auditors are able to actually see whether the proceeds of green bond issues are used for the purpose, but it's almost too soon to tell whether it's working as intended. So I would say it's not either or. The awareness is growing, and it's kind of permeating the markets, and everybody's talking about it. But I don't think we kind of moved past talking yet. And one risk I want to highlight here is the more greenwashing we observe, the more kind of cynical investors are becoming about green instruments, right? Why would I accept lower return on a green bond if I know it's just going to be used for general purpose? Then maybe I should be purchasing a bond that pays me more. That's just a regular one. So that's something to be worried about going forward, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so second question. When we look at the environmental policies of corporations, companies, and banks, they are most often about reducing the carbon footprint of the logistic, reducing energy, and switching to green energy sources. But what about the climate critical transition of the food system? We know that we need to transition to a plant-based model of nutrition, and the extinction of industrial farms, big problems, to fight climate catastrophe effectively. Do you see a change in business approach here in this with regard this food system and yeah, industrial farms? Do they see
Yeah,
that this is really main problem?
it's a great question. Yeah, so as you probably know, everybody in the audience probably knows that a lot of companies are making climate commitments and net zero commitments, and the governments too. And we actually, at the Food System Innovation, which is a nonprofit that I'm a co-founder of, we actually had somebody look at how ESG ratings are incorporating animal food related emissions, right? So the way we did it, we're pretending that we are a large investor and that we're looking to make an ESG investment. And we wanted to know which rating we should be relying on. And so we would meet with people who are like selling those products, like the people who would actually give us all the information about their methodology, because we were posing as a big customer. And what we discovered is pretty much none of the ESG ratings incorporate animal-related emissions. Some have very little animal welfare component in their ESG rating, going to the kind of the social part as opposed to environmental part. But in the environmental part, none of them talked about what kind of food. Some of them would have a food transportation part, but we know it's only a tiny share of total emissions from the food industry comes from food transportation. Most of it actually comes from animal food production, especially the CAFOs. And so none of them had that information. So we need to, talking about awareness, that's the part of where we really need to raise awareness that a quarter of the emissions are coming from animal ag. And we are not, UN FAO have published long time ago that we are not going to reach our climate goals without changing the food system. But somehow there is a resistance to that knowledge outside of the vegan community. Again, for obvious reasons, people don't want to give up their meat. And so we need to keep raising awareness about that. And I think for us, the activists, one way to do it is to really not be shy about our choices. Every conference I go to, I get a big, thing about, I have to eat vegan. I'm not shy about that. I don't say, oh, okay, I'm just going to go out and get something. And I explain why. Any conference I'm organizing on climate, my default menu is plant-based. I allow people to say, well, do you have special requirements? Like if you really feel like you need to eat chicken or fish, you can tell me, we'll make it, but the default is plant-based. And I advertise and explain why. If you have a conference on climate, you really cannot be serving meat or dairy or chicken or fish. It's just, and we still need to keep raising awareness about that. Everywhere you go, you can just keep talking about how important animal ag is to climate.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. That's the stopping transmission. I don't know if it's something wrong. Yeah, probably. Okay, you're again. Fine. Would you like to add something to this question, or you finish?
Yeah, I think I'm done. I think the answer really is that there is not much change yet. There's some food service companies that are introducing plant-based options, but we need to move plant-based from option to default to make a real change.
I'm happy that in practically each scientific report on diet, you can find the information that the only way is to go to change to plant-based diet. So science is totally on our side. There's only solution for the future if you want to fight climate change. Yeah. Okay. Now the third question. Let's stop for a moment at the animal agriculture sector. our big problem. How about getting people in charge of economics and public policy to connect the dots between the operation of the animal agriculture sector and the economy, public finances, healthcare spending, and climate and environmental impacts? In our view, there is no other industry than the animal agriculture sector and the agriculture that serves it that has had such a negative impact on so many areas of our lives on our planet. Let me give 2 examples. We put a lot of money to animal agriculture from our taxes, and then we treat people who get zoonotic disease from our taxes. We spend public money on that part of the economy, and then again, with public money, we respond to environmental and climate impacts. Do you see a change? Are experts in economics, public finance, and public policy starting to raise this issue? Do they see this problem?
So I don't see much discussion of that in the mainstream. I think people like us talk about that, but animal ag is such a powerful, at least in the US, and I imagine most of Europe as well, is a highly concentrated industry, which means there are just a few players with a lot of political power. They, give a lot of political donations. They have very, very powerful lobbies. They get a lot of subsidies, as you said, and from what our analysis showed is, trying to convince politicians to take away subsidies from a powerful interest group is basically a non-starter, because it's not going to happen. You can't reduce support. So what we are trying to lobby for is to even the playing field, and we lobby for subsidies to alternative protein sector. And basically saying, look, we understand there are reasons you need to, subsidize animal ag, even though very little of that actually goes to individual farmers, right? But how about leveling the playing field and supporting research and scaling up of alternative protein, be that plant-based or biomass fermentation, precision fermentation, or cultivated? And so that's basically the ask that we have of the politicians. We think it's more feasible to ask for adding something rather than taking away something from powerful interest groups. There is already, so I would say there's some success that is demonstrated by how hard the animal ag is pushing back, right? So you've seen in Europe as well as here in Florida, the laws have been passed to ban cultivated meat. So it doesn't even exist in the marketplace, but the meat industry is clearly scared of that. And so that means we're succeeding. Also in the public information space, all that misinformation about how plant-based alternatives are unhealthy, unnatural, that narrative is being pushed by a concentrated effort of animal ag industry. We know exactly which consulting agency they're working with. We know exactly the money flow is. And also interestingly, the pharmaceutical industry is also working on protecting animal ag industry for 2 reasons. First, they supply a lot of pharmaceuticals to animal growers, right? A lot of antibiotics, a lot of other things I don't want to think about. But also the public health problems that animal products are creating also helps pharmaceuticals, because it produces all these chronic diseases that, from cardiovascular to diabetes to cancers, that are, a lot of them risk of those increases a lot with the consumption of animal-based foods. And these are diseases on which pharma is making a lot of money. So between direct impact of animal ag on the pharma bottom line and, their fear of people getting healthier by eating healthier diet, they're on a lot of issues together with animal ag. So it's a very powerful force that we're fighting against. But I don't think it's any more powerful than, say, the oil companies, right? And oil companies have been defending their bottom line with politicians as well. But nevertheless, we had subsidies in alternative energy sector, right? And that's what we keep bringing up to the politicians. You can have both. You can, still be friends with oil industry, but you can support the development of solar technology, wind technology. You can subsidize installation. And so that's been happening. How is alternative protein space any different than alternative energy? And that's the message we take to politicians. And it lands with some. Not everybody, especially in the US, not everybody even believes in climate change. So then we have to use other arguments that are health-based or national security-based or things like that.
When we talk about this subsidizing, about putting money on such things like animal factory or coal, oil, and gas, I now have in mind the speech by dinosaurs at the conference of the United Nations in New York. One dinosaur entered this conference and have a short speech to humans, to people. And this dinosaur said that he or she do not understand how we can we simply subsidize our extinction. They extinct from natural sources, but we human, we pay a lot of money for our extinction, of our species. It's difficult to understand for dinosaurs, but also for many of us.
Right. In fact, there is a new documentary I happened to watch on the plane, actually. It's called Eating Our Way to Extinction. So for people who are not fully aware how animals are contributing to our extinction, how eating animals contributes to our extinction, it's a great documentary, so well done, so well researched. And
the title is?
It's called Eating Our Way to Extinction.
Eating. Thank you.
I think you can just see it online for free. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for this information about this film. Fourth question is still similar to this, is still connected with animal agriculture sector. Let's go back to the investor attitudes and responsibility. There has been an ongoing debate for years about ending the funding of banks and other financial institutions for investment in business ventures based on fossil fuels. Do you already see a similar trend in the culture of financing the animal agriculture sector? Will the commercial sector ever end up on investment blacklist? Do you see it's a chance that this really happen, that they will be on the blacklist, this sector?
Yeah, so let me back up a little bit on that question, because the idea that we want investors to just take money away from the fossil fuel sector is oversimplified one, because think about your utility provider, right? It's a fossil fuel sector. What you really want them to do is not to disappear. If you take away the funds, you want them, they're going to disappear. They won't be able to keep functioning, right? But you still need your heat and your hot water and your electricity. So what you really want them to do is change their technology from using fossil fuels to a green one, right? How do you change technology? You need investment. In fact, you need capital, long-term investment. That needs to be financed. And so if financial companies just take money away from utilities and transportations, they're actually slowing green transition. They're not speeding it up. What we really want them to do is within the industry, take money from those who make no effort of greening and give money to those who are trying to green their technology. That's really what you want to do. So I think by analogy, what you really want to do is say, okay, let's think about animal ag. This is a vertically integrated industry, right? So there's a whole bunch of farmers. Some of them might be working directly for large corporations. Some of them might be individual contractors. But once it goes to slaughterhouse level, that's very highly concentrated. And then it's concentrated all the way up the supply chain to meat packing, distribution before it ends in a supermarket or in a restaurant, which again is then dispersed, right? So it's in the middle, it's heavily concentrated, and it's really a food industry. It's not really an agriculture industry that's controlling what goes in there because they're so highly concentrated. And so what we need to change is a food industry. We need them to start switching from meat products to plant-based and other alternative products, right? In case of food industry, it doesn't require as much investment as changing your utility from coal to wind or solar or tidal, right? So that's just huge projects. Just saying, I'm going to replace those meat burgers with those plant-based burgers, plenty of options in Europe. I don't know all the brand names. It's not a big ask. It doesn't take big investment. So I think blacklisting might actually work better in the food industry, but we need to realize that we can't really focus on agriculture because we have those farmers that are barely making their livelihood doing what they've been doing for generations. They need to see a change in demand so that, say, instead of, raising cattle on their farm, talking about small farmers right now, right? Instead of raising cattle on the farm, maybe they can grow peas as an ingredient for plant-based burgers and stuff like that, right? For large CAFOs are really controlled by those food industries. So taking it, you kind of have to start with a demand. They have so much money, they don't really rely a lot on external financing. And so I think there the blacklisting can work, but it needs to come from individual investors, the customers, right? So when we were talking to financial institutions and asking them what would make them change whether the animal ag is part of their calculations for the ESG ratings, they said we need to see demand from our customers. So more people like me come and ask those questions. Say, hey, I want you to manage my, $2 million, $20 million portfolio, and I want to make sure none of that is supporting animal ag. That's when they're going to change. They're not just going to change on their own. So it comes from like individual investors. We really need to work with high wealth individuals on their understanding of how harmful animal ag is to make sure none of their money goes to support. Because the financial institutions, in the end, they're serving them. They also serve individual investors. There was a study done by Monica Pietrzewski and co-authors in Europe surveying consumers on would they be willing to take a lower interest rate on their bank deposits if the bank deposits would be green, right? And so they were just asking about green. They were not talking specifically about animal ag. And generally, the answer is yes. People are willing to, get a little bit less of interest rate on their bank deposits if they know it's not supporting that industries. And so I think, that's where I think more conversation about animal welfare could be even more powerful than the climate conversation, because they feel like maybe they're already doing something about climate. They're driving electric car, they're biking, But if you say, well, do you know that your money is supporting extreme cruelty in CAFOs? They might say, oh, yeah, I want to have an animal cruelty-free deposit, please. So I think what we can do is not only when we talk to, at least our vegan activists, to also make them aware that even if they have a small amount of money in a bank, they can still talk to the bank and say, hey, how do I make sure my money is not supporting animal cruelty? And if somebody's running a nonprofit and they have a nonprofit account with a bank or a for-profit account with a bank that's a bigger one, really have that conversation. Just to read, you're probably going to have a no as an answer, but it's a beginning of conversation. It takes a lot of conversations to really raise awareness. So that's something we can also do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the last question from my turn. At this year's European Vegan Summit, we talk about the state of the vegan market and its future. How do you, as a prominent economist, view the health of this market, vegan market? How do you forecast its future, this future for vegan market? What do you think that the dynamics and direction of its development will look like in short future?
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts on that. So first of all, do we really want to talk about vegan market, right? So I don't know global statistics. In the US, about 2% population are vegan. And in fact, there are now a lot of products that make a life of a vegan much easier, right? I was just making, an omelet with eggs and sausage yesterday. Did not involve any animals. Eggs or sausage are all plant-based. So I can do it now. I couldn't really do it 10 years ago. But I think that's probably less important than changing what the other 98% of population eat, right? And so what I want to think about is not so much a vegan market, but reducing animal food consumption of the general population. So we've been trying to convince people to be vegan since Peter Seeger's book, right? So since Animal Liberation in the 70s, right? And we're at 2%. That's too slow. It's working, but it's too slow. And I think it's a lot easier to convince 100% of population to reduce their meat consumption by 10% than to convince 10% of population to be fully vegan. The impact on animals is identical, right? So I think we need to step away from this all or nothing, which we don't do in any other field of our life, right? So if you are a person who recycles, if you don't recycle one tiny piece of paper, it doesn't mean you're no longer a recycler, right? So we should get away from the labels and kind of say, okay, why don't we just try to change incentives for people towards eating less meat? And it could be for all kinds of reasons: climate reasons, animal cruelty reasons, personal health reasons, public health reasons, the resource use reasons. There's so many reasons to eat less meat, and there are really no reasons to not, except like habit and cultural norms and, the fact that it's so subsidized that sometimes it's actually cheaper to have a burger than to have a salad, which is ridiculous. So, and also it's kind of the idea in the general population that if you're vegan, all you eat is a salad. I'm actually vegan who doesn't like a salad. I'd have rice and veggies, but I'm not a salad person, but I don't have a problem being vegan. And so what I think we need is the market for alternative foods that are acceptable to general population. And in the plant-based space, that means the products that match, they don't necessarily have to mimic the meats directly, but they have to match on price, convenience, and attractiveness of the taste. Should be tasty, right? And shouldn't be worse for your health, which generally they are not, despite of the rhetoric that the animal ag is pushing. So that market is growing, but it's going through some growing pains, I would say. Like any new market, you have a whole bunch of new products. They're not all going to survive, right? So in the plant-based product space, we should expect some consolidation and some brands going away and only brands that are more successful going forward, and that's good. What this industry now needs is some capital investment to scale up. Essentially, they're facing this catch-22 problem where they cannot really spend money to scale up unless they know they can get sufficient demand. But they cannot get sufficient demand until the cost goes down, but the cost is not going to go down until they scale up. Right? And so that's where some intervention from nonprofits or the governments can really help to facilitate, say, a giant order from Sodexo that is serving, by the way, a lot of government cafeterias, right? To say, okay, we actually want to make an order for so many plant-based chicken nuggets or burgers or whatnot, starting 2026 or something like that. That would give time for some of those brands to scale up, negotiate their equipment at a lower price, negotiate their inputs at the lower price, because once you are a bigger scale, you're in a much better position to actually get your ingredients cheaper. And so that's kind of what's needed. It's called market shaping. We're also trying on getting this accomplished maybe for some brands. Recently, a company that I know of in the US that's in a biomass fermentation, they have signed a deal with the US Department of Defense to feed the military. So that's going to help them scale up because they have a contract with a price and everything. And so things like that will definitely help industry get through this difficult growing pains of like scaling up where the capital investment is needed but doesn't have a huge return. In terms of the cultivated meat, the problems they are facing right now is that the first couple of rounds of investors are essentially lost their patience because they are expecting profitability sooner. These are kind of investors that are more used to the tech markets. They're not so understanding of the capital investment and equipment costs, because in the tech, you just need a computer, right? You don't need giant vats and warehouses and air conditioners and things like that. And so that's where also, would be great if government could step in and help carry that industry through that situation where the hedge funds are no longer interested, but profitability is not there to get the regular financing. I hope I answered the question. So,
yeah, thank you for your insight. Now let's open the floor to our panel for further discussion question. Unfortunately, we have no much time to a few questions. I think it's only time for one question. Maybe this: what are the biggest challenges that you, as the voice of the science, are facing to be more effective in navigating the change for the better?
That's a great question. So for me, I'm a university professor. My performance is evaluated on my publications, as you know. And what I find is when I write papers about climate and food or alternative proteins, I still face resistance from the referees and the editors into having full understanding of the problem. And not just because it's kind of new, so I'm hoping it's just going to take a little bit more time. I think, finding like-minded people is extremely important. In economics, we have like a Google sheet of, plant-based economists floating around so that we can reach out to people if we need some support. A lot of these people are behavioral economists. Not so many are like kind of global system economists as what I am. And so I think we just need more people working on those issues. I wish there were more people working on those issues. And, it's all very interdisciplinary. We do have a climate faculty coalition at UC Santa Cruz. So we have an email list where everybody's sharing whatever new things they learn. But it's a little bit all kind of boiling in our own little group. How do we get, so I think the challenge to kind of answer the question actually, how do we get more people to bring into the understanding and to get them to start doing research on agriculture climate nexus specifically, because I think that's what's going to help us move the solution forward. So just, get more researchers to think about those issues. But to attract researchers, you need to have a promise of successful publications and grants. So it's a little bit, you need more senior people to take a lead before we can, bring young people in.
Thank you. We have no time, but maybe very short question and very short answer. One sentence, if it's possible. Maybe it's interesting for us. What made you change your diet? What's happened in your life that you change your diet?
Yeah, so actually, I'm a very rational person. So when I was at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, my research director was vegan. And I asked him, well, what's your reason for being vegan? And as I was asking this question, I realized the reason I'm asking this question is that there's so many reasons to be vegan. That's why we asked the question. What's on the other side of the scale? It tastes good. I'm used to it. It's just so the cost benefits to me, like suddenly, like by revelation, became so obvious. And so I became vegetarian until I learned about what's going on in the egg and dairy industry in terms of the male chicks and veal and then the seafood. Somebody gave me an oyster as a gift to get a pearl out of it. And I was opening the oyster and I felt how it was fighting back. And so that's where the notion that maybe shellfish is more like plants than animals was completely destroyed for me. The plant does not fight back. And so that's what was the last time I had any seafood. So yeah, it takes time. I think we're fighting our, doesn't matter when people, what's the reason people switch to plant-based diet. Within a few months of that, the compassion for animals comes later, even if it's not the initial reason, because the cognitive dissonance of like, I'm a good person, but I'm eating meat kind of goes away once you stop eating meat. You realize, oh yeah, a good person really should not be participating in that cruelty and death and things like that. So
interesting story. Unfortunately, the time is almost finished. Thank you very much, Professor Galina Hale, for sharing your invaluable insight and expertise with us today. Your perspective on the role of research and development in driving market success for vegan products have been incredibly enlightening, very interesting for all of us, for me personally. Thank you very much. We hope this session has provided all of you, all people watching our conversation, with a deeper understanding of scientific advancement and innovations shaping the future of the vegan market. As we continue to explore these topics throughout the European Vegan Summit 2024, we encourage you to stay engage and join us for upcoming sessions. There are still many interesting debates, lectures. Thank you all for your participation. Please continue to follow the Green Ref Institute. Remember about the Green Ref Institute and support our efforts in advocating for a sustainable and ethical food system. We look forward to seeing you in our future discussion. have a wonderful evening, short evening. Goodbye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.